I'm Leslie, and I am a life coach based here in Brisbane, Australia, where we have just gone into another lockdown. So much of what I work on with my clients is navigating their relationship with certain societal expectations that might be impacting their decision making. On that note, I am an openly polyamorous woman. I have a husband and I have another partner who lives overseas. And in this video, I am joined by him for a discussion around ethical non-monogamy, some of the myths and facts, our experiences, and a few things about our relationship. So, stick around and hear what we have to say.
Good morning. Or no, it's afternoon or evening over there, isn't it?
It is 5:35 here.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Matteo. I am here in Albuquerque, and Leslie and I are partners, and we're going to be talking about non-monogamy and our experiences.
Very good. That was well done. So what are you doing in Albuquerque?
I'm a PhD student in American Studies, and so I'm taking classes, and also I am teaching as well, working on my dissertation. So I have a 4-year appointment, and I'm in year 2. So I don't know how long I'll be here, but at least for another couple of years.
Until you move to Australia.
I know, yeah, we've talked about that, and I know, Anir and I have talked about that. My other partner, who I live with here, it's definitely something that is enticing.
Well, good. I'm glad. You also have a child?
Yeah, us, me, Sahayan, Saxana Rossi, and yeah, 21 weeks as of yesterday. So, little baby.
Yeah,
Yeah,
such a little cutie as well. Just
I
like
know.
Daddy.
Yeah, like a little dinosaur. There's always always making like noises and like likes to eat everything. Likes to try and eat my face all the time.
Oh, that's so sweet.
It's cute. We dance together. It's fun.
Aw. Some people get really weirded out by the idea of being in a non-monogamous relationship while you have a child.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I've definitely experienced that with, Tony and me and with our daughter. People are like, well, how does that work? It's like, works pretty well. You can manage your time and your schedule. It's not like we're having full-on orgies in front of our kid. Like, come on. But anyway, so ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships. How do you identify in terms of those categories?
Ethical non-monogamy, polyamory. I use those somewhat interchangeably, even though they mean somewhat different things. I think it just also depends on who I'm talking to, I guess.
Yeah.
Like when I'm writing about it, I might use ethical non-monogamy, or if I'm writing about like doing like a political analysis, I'd probably say like anti-monogamy, because I would be viewing monogamy as a structure and not like as a personal choice.
Yeah.
But when I'm speaking to like other people who already identify as polyamorous, then I'll say, well, I'm also poly. Or
Because people who are polyamorous all experience that in very different ways. That initial conversation is always just the beginning of a potentially much larger conversation. So yeah, sometimes when I'll say to people, if they ask about, or if it comes out in the conversation that I have a husband and I have another partner, they'll have loads of questions, but they're like, wait, how does that work? I'm like, well, I'm polyamorous. That means I can have multiple romantic relationships and everyone involved is cool with it. Now, Matteo, I want to hear your version of how we connected.
Yeah, I mean, we met on OkCupid. It was a while ago.
Yeah, it was the end of 2019. because it was when I was visiting my family in Pennsylvania.
And then, we talked and we were supposed to meet and then we never did. And then like we just stopped talking until June, right, of last year during all the police protests here. And well, I was in Philadelphia at the time. That's where I
Hmm.
lived before, and then we never stopped talking. So
We just kept
we
going
just
and
kept
going and
moving
going.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
better
I
already.
remember like the reason that I couldn't meet up with you when I was in Pennsylvania was because I was wrestling with the fact that my daughter was jet lagged almost the entire time
Mm.
I was there. And with the time difference between Australia and Pennsylvania, it was just a nightmare. It was a nightmare. So it was really hard to even make short-term plans to be out of the house. So yeah, then that just never happened. And I remember one of the reasons I reached out to you again all those months later on Facebook was, well, there were a couple of cute selfies here and there that I was like, okay. But it was really when all the uprisings were happening in Philadelphia and all the news that made it, you know, to hear about Philadelphia specifically and the uprisings. I was like, I wonder how Mateo's doing in all of this. I'm gonna check in on him. How long have you been living an ethically non-monogamous lifestyle?
How long have I had non-monogamous desires? Always, since I started having the desire to connect to people in general. Um, and so when I was a teenager, I didn't really know anything about non-monogamy. I never heard of it. So I didn't know
Yeah.
anything. I didn't know anybody who was non-monogamous. I didn't know anything about it. I would say the first time I like practiced it in a way that was like consciously, actually, maybe like 2011. I used to go to like a goth industrial club in Philly.
Yep.
And a lot of people were non-monogamous and like solo poly, I guess they identified as. And so I started identifying as that, even though I literally had heard the term on one night and then identified it as it later in the same night. So
You're like, oh wait, that's me.
I can't remember the exact conversation or date or anything.
Mm,
And so it was really like only, it was like 2015 when I met Nira that like we entered the relationship as non-monogamous and then went through all different stages of development, actually doing it in real life and having like real people's lives. It's a lot easier in
mm,
theory than
yeah,
it is in practice.
exactly. And that's such an important awareness to have of yourself and of the relationship. Like when Tony and I opened up our relationship, one of the things that we were very clear about was that we weren't going to make it the Tony and Leslie show. A lot of people go into the ethical non-monogamous world with this idea that it's a free-for-all, or that's the
Mm-hmm.
impression that people from the outside get, that it's like, oh, anything goes, we're just partying and blah blah blah. It's like, no, no. Tony and I were really conscious of the fact that whoever we would start dating or get into a more serious relationship with was a whole entire person in their own right, and not just
Exactly.
a project we were working on or someone we were experimenting on. Because we've only ever dated separately, but it's still
Right.
that idea that, like, you still have to respect people. And I never went out with anyone without them knowing that I was polyamorous. I mostly only have dated polyamorous people, but there's so much more to it than a lot of people realize.
Like what you're saying, like a lot of people, like they claim they're polyamorous, but then they want everything to be in their primary relationship to be identical, except that they have this other partner, which
Hmm.
is impossible. It's not going to work. And like
Mm.
everybody just needs to understand that we're the more important people here. And also like if in any way this other relationship threatens the dominant structure, the other partner, if they feel jealous or threatened in any way, they could just like veto the relationship or just be
Mm.
like create really restrictive rules that make it
Yeah.
impossible to develop a relationship.
Yeah.
And I've experienced this too with people I've dated.
Yeah. So
Um,
have I.
I dated somebody in Philly for 3 years, and they had a partner who like had all these ridiculous rules. They had very specific rules about sex and like when we could see each other and how we could see each other. And like at the time, I hadn't yet like developed enough confidence and maybe enough like consciousness about these things in practice to be like, wait, this is bullshit. I'm
Mm,
not going to put up with this. Like, it's completely unethical, I think, to be like, oh, our relationship is more important than any other relationship. There are, I guess, what you might call like natural hierarchies.
mm,
If you're together with someone for a very long time, you know that person better. If you have a more integrated life, like it goes without saying that those things exist in the world. Like we can't deny that.
yeah,
But to produce these artificial forms of control over people, over not just over yourself and over your partner, but over your partner's partner. And like many people would say, like, oh, that's totally reasonable. Yeah, what do you expect? But that's
yeah,
because they're living in a monogamous centric world and like a
yeah,
couple centric world.
yeah,
So they see the couple, as being the most important thing, and you should
yeah,
do anything to protect it,
yeah.
even
And it
though
requires,
even as you go out and pursue your desires.
yeah, and it requires a strong sense of empathy as well. Like I consider Tony my primary partner. We've built a life together. We are married in the legal sense as well, and we've got a daughter, and our daughter is our number one priority. Having a strong union between Tony and me is part of how we protect our daughter, and that's natural. That doesn't mean that I can mess around with Tony's dating life just that, and that he should be subject to whatever whims I might have, and vice versa. If we've made a commitment to meet up with someone at a particular time on a particular day, and then we go, oh, well, actually I changed my mind, you can't go out tonight. That's
Mm,
not just putting him at a disadvantage, it's also making decisions for this other person. It's also disrespecting this other person's schedule. Yeah, it's just showing a general lack of respect for this other relationship. And that's not cool. Sure, there have been times where I, would have preferred Tony just hang out at home because I'm feeling kind of meh, but that's my stuff to deal with. And same with him. We've made those agreements. So if I were to put arbitrary restrictions onto Tony just because, I'm having some sort of a mood swing, that's not ethical. I don't want to put him in a position where he's constantly having to choose which one of his partners to disappoint. Like that's not cool. And that's what I mean by things not being the Tony and Leslie show and everyone else is just some secondary character in
mm.
our story. It's like, no. Mm-mm. But that's how relationships are. They're complex.
Yeah, I mean, these are actual people's lives. So like, there's real consequences. If you were feeling like very depressed in a way that you really needed support, it's important that you're able to maybe even reach out to both of them, and so
Mm,
maybe we could all hang out together, even though,
mm,
as you're saying, like you're not all dating, right? You're not like sharing a partner sexually or romantically, but that doesn't mean that we can't support each other in that
mm,
regard, and vice versa, right? Obviously, like, it's not just toward that person, it can be the other direction as well. Maybe you had plans, but like this other person is in need, just as you would do for a friend or, anybody else. You make adjustments in real life, but like developing the right structure and like trust, and I guess you would call it like relationship infrastructure. Like these are
yeah.
ways that you can reach out to people when you need to, or having that kind of like open channel
Mm,
is a really important thing.
yeah. And that's one reason I really appreciate that Tony and I are in agreement about getting to know each other's partners,
Hmm.
having any sort of communication with them. I know that a lot of people have more of a don't ask, don't tell policy, which, to each their own, but that's not for me. It's like, I when I chat with Nira, it's an open channel of communication. We can talk about whatever. It's really good to be able to do that, because it's not like you're pitting one relationship against the other, and then it's like you develop these stories in your head over what this other person might be saying or doing or
Yeah.
manipulating a situation or something. It's like, well, no, like we know each other, we're cool with each other. We might all live together someday, which would be
Yeah.
awesome.
You know, a lot of people I think are in this, they want to have the thrill of like dating, you know, it's like new relationship energy, or maybe they want to have sex. Okay, fine. Like that stuff's not bad, but it's just they want to do that, but also maintain everything identical. They don't want to like have to change their life in any other way. And I think that
Mm,
these rules they are put in place, like a lot of things, to tell your partner what they can and can't do with their other partners, et cetera, is to like protect the primary relationship. But I think it has the opposite effect. I think
mm,
it has a very corrosive effect on your trust and also on your
it
dynamic.
can, for sure. Yeah.
If this happens so often, like, you know, fairly often, and you're like, oh, you know, you can only hang out on Tuesdays, or what, you know, like you place all these restrictions, that leads to resentment. And it's actually very corrosive. Whereas the opposite direction, if you have a more open dynamic, I'm not saying it can't shine a light on existing problems, but it's
Mm,
very unlikely to produce new problems. It's actually very
mm,
likely to solve problems by bringing things that, you know, maybe you had mistrust, maybe you didn't have good communication in these areas.
mm.
It's no guarantee that those problems are going to be solved.
It's a way to identify those problems, for sure. To clarify, because I also know that you don't subscribe to the whole idea of people opening up their relationship to solve a problem.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying it can't happen, right? Like,
Mm,
you know, if it happens in one case, you prove me wrong. But people will be like, we're having marriage troubles or whatever. Oh, it's the solution to this is to like date other people.
yeah, it's
It
like,
doesn't
no,
that
no.
doesn't seem like a solution to the problem at all. And it's just like I think a more when you think about talking to another person's, you know, partner, a metamor, right, is the term. Maybe they have partners, right? They call that a polycule when you have like many different partners. You don't have to necessarily be in a sexual or romantic relationship in that classic sense with all those people, but they're kind of part of your network of people. When you're more open, the more open you are, actually the less you have to compartmentalize things and schedule
Mm-hmm.
everything very detailed and like have a spreadsheet of like what days. And when you can start to,
A Google
because it
Calendar.
can, yeah, because then it can blend together just like you would with a friend. You don't
Mm.
have like, if you have 6 friends, you're not like, shit, I can only see this person on Tuesday. I can only see them on Wednesday. And then like, you know, if they cross, then it's a problem. I'm not saying you can't have alone time and stuff, but you know, the more open and the more blended things are, the more easy it is to integrate these things with your like actual life.
Yeah. Or the more comfortable it can be. It
Yeah,
can
because
definitely reduce the tension of having to keep things separate and pretend that everything is happening in isolation. It's like,
mm-hmm,
no, no. And that's the thing too. The changes that can potentially happen to that primary relationship, it's not always a bad thing. It can be really beautiful. When
yeah,
you meet
absolutely.
someone who, well, it's like what I was saying to you recently. I was like, you and Tony would be really good housemates. It's like
Mm-hmm.
any connection that you make with someone has a potential to bring something wonderful into that primary relationship if you're practicing any sort of hierarchical structure of polyamory, which some people do and some people don't. But even within those hierarchies, it's not like this is the most important for all the reasons that we've been discussing. He has to bear the brunt of most of my most of my issues more so than you do, which in a way, puts you in a place of privilege. That
For
doesn't
now.
mean that we're, for now, yeah, that doesn't mean that we're not there for each other's whatever. It's just because of geography, because of everything else. It's just how it is right now.
But I think like, you know, you can go into a dynamic even with the same person in a particular orientation and change dramatically over time. You might go into something being like, you know, I have a set idea of how I want to do this. And that's how you want to do it when you first talk about it, or until, but then conditions change. You know how you date people and like, it's like, okay, we like each other, we're hanging out, it's cool. But then if you meet people who you're like, I really want to integrate my life together with these people, this person, people, you know, maybe all the above, then conditions have changed, right? Then you change, and then they change, and then everything changes. That's not a bad thing. I mean, that's just reality. Yeah, sometimes, of course, that can be ruptural in a way that's like people break up. That can be something. And like, I think people will then blame that on polyamory or non-monogamy. But I think
Yeah.
like that's just bringing something to the surface that was already there. It's going to cause issues that you need to deal with, but like it enriches your life in ways that are impossible without more connections. And I think the more people you can connect with meaningfully, like the better life is.
Yeah, I've been asked by a number of people things like, "Oh, well, aren't you afraid that Tony might decide he likes someone else better and then he's going to leave you?" And my response is usually no.
No.
No, I don't live in fear of that, partially because he doesn't have to choose between me and another person. And if we were to break up, it wouldn't necessarily be because he decided he liked someone else better. That would point more to some sort of problem in our relationship that we then decided to part ways over. And being able to forge those meaningful connections with people that might not even lead to like a romantic, sexual kind of relationship is one of the massive benefits, one of the biggest benefits for me. I've developed some very wonderful friendships with people who I may not have had if there hadn't been that full willingness to see where things could go. And
Yeah.
when you really get to know a person and can work out what you mean to each other's lives, even if it doesn't cross a line into anything romantic, like that's amazing. Like that is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that's actually very restricted, especially when you're talking about anybody who's like cisgendered and heterosexual trying to go across to a person of a different gender. This is a lesser problem, but not a non-existent problem for like queer people, especially a problem, especially for men who have female partners who want to then have male friends. It can become very big problem.
Mm.
There's
Are you
like,
talking about for the female partners?
yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
it's a very common problem for like
Yeah.
people who are female identified. Even if they just have a coworker that they want to like get coffee with, this could be a very big
Mm.
problem. You're just like completely closed off, right? And it goes both ways,
Yeah.
but I think it's much more impactful because of like the structure we live in
Yeah.
on women. The idea that you would want to date another man, like men only want sex, etc. There's all these stereotypes. So why would you want to get coffee with this person? Like either you want to have sex with them or you're stupid. You know what they want. So like it
Yeah.
creates
Yeah.
this whole like really distrustful dynamic.
Yeah. And this idea that like, oh, you know that guy just wants to have sex with you, right? Blah blah blah. It's like, does that mean I'm gonna have sex with him? No, that's not what that means. But it's like I get friend crushes all the time. Sometimes I meet someone and I'm like, I really want to be friends with this person. Like I want to be this person's best friend. Or I just get really excited about people. And sometimes I want to shout it from the rooftops. But it doesn't necessarily connect to some sort of sexual attraction. But, like in my previous relationship, which was very emotionally abusive, that would not have been okay, especially when I was doing parkour training with a bunch of guys who are running around with their shirts off all the time. It's like, it's like, what is it you feel threatened about?
And it's just like, yeah, I mean, monogamy really conditions this. Like being able to build like rich relationships with like, more people, it has this kind of like effect. While it enriches you as you create more friendships, or maybe you go on a date with somebody and you're like, oh, like I had a sexual attraction to this person, but like, it's not going to work out. And then they become a friend. That's happened to me many times.
Yeah.
Many of my friends, that's how I gained my friends. But it doesn't have to just like end there, like, because the concept of being just a friend, it's really corrosive and it really cuts you off from like connecting to people.
Yeah.
And I think it's because people don't value friendship.
And I find that very damaging, even just on a personal level, because like I have such a huge heart, and like I have a huge capacity to love, And I find myself checking in with myself constantly and how I'm relating to this person or that person. It's like, oh, am I coming on too strong? Am I giving them too much attention? Are they going to think that I'm after something that I'm not? And that, that it's annoying that that has to run through my head as often as it does. I can feel love for a person on a friendship level or on a platonic friendship level and not have ulterior motives.
Yeah.
And recognize it as something that if that person helps me indulge some aspect of my personality that is very enriching to my life. People who question non-monogamy or ethical non-monogamy will often talk about how if you really love your partner, then they should be enough, or you should do whatever it takes to make them happy, and you should be committed to that.
Right.
And that always makes me think, first of all, it's a flawed argument, because it implies that there is a limitation to happiness, and that somehow we as individual humans have the capacity to meet that limitation for someone. If I did everything in my power to make Tony happy, that was a lot of self-sacrifice on my part. And yeah, we have a reciprocal relationship that involves making each other happy. But then to say like, oh, okay, we're full to capacity now. No more happiness. You can't have any more. Like that's just gross to me.
There's definitely no limits to happiness, to desire in general. Like there, of course, are limits to time and energy. There are limits. Many of those limits are, some of those limits are like, biological, like kind of like the limits of how long you can literally stay awake. But other things are like, of course, the limits of living in our, our social structure. And really, and they can be very big limiting factors.
Mm.
But when you're talking about something abstract like happiness or desire, those things are limitless. Not only limitless for us, limitless for our species. No matter what, we will continue to go further.
Yeah.
Every time we achieve something, we could just keep going further. Some of these things can be solved by like integrating our lives more fully, having a more kind of polycule network. And things that can't be solved by that can be solved by a collective struggle or movement of people trying to change the conditions to allow these sorts of social belongings and relations to be more fully realized. The idea that like there's just one person and that person's going to meet all your needs, it's not even about that. That's so like, I feel like that's like a red herring. It's not that my needs aren't met by this other person. That's not why I'm non-monogamous. Like that has nothing to do with it. It's not because the other person is insufficient or in any way less than like that like I have 80%, but I need to get this other 20% from this other person. It's not like that at all. Like you're not trying to fill up a pie chart.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
and
Tony doesn't go out late at night on a Friday, for example, whereas I, with the right people, would happily just stay out all night. Not frequently, but I'm not going to be like, oh, no, you have to go out and be social when I want you to be social. No, he's an amazing person. And I didn't marry him because I wanted to marry myself.
I'm not trying to date other people to like fill gaps in my life that like are left over. I'm not trying to put together like a Frankenstein. I'm not trying to piece together the perfect set of like people to meet my needs.
Franken partner.
It's like, that's a ridiculous way to think of relationships. Like this is not that's not what building a more enriched kind of network of like relationships and like integrating your life with more people is about. It's not about you having your needs met. And in any case, even if every need was met, hypothetically, would it not be better to meet another person that meets those same needs twice? And then what if that other person also, finds that their needs are met by your partner, like, they're perfect friends, or, this is all hypothetical, but if one is good, is two not better? It's only not better if you do it in a way that's very exclusive. But if you do it in a way that's integrated, I mean, you're literally multiplying your happiness in that regard.
Yeah.
I should say you're multiplying the possibility of happiness and the possibility of developing rich relations, which will only then multiply further because you're going to then the people that they care about, and like
Yeah.
opens up a whole nother world in that regard that you might not have even considered that you didn't have.
Yeah. Yeah. Any close connection you make with someone is a potential new open door to some other aspect of life that you may not have even considered. And that's what's so wonderful about being open to bringing people into your life, to having that agreement with whoever you're partnered with, that they too can benefit from that way of living. It's a wonder to me when people think that polyamory is all about sex. It's like, well, my partner in New Mexico, I've never actually met him in person. So, figure that one out. It's people's idea that somehow that physical act of sex is the be all and end all of what defines a relationship.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like,
true.
no.
You may develop an extremely rich relationship with your metamors. You may not have any sexual attraction to them, but you build a very meaningful relationship with them in ways that are not like made less than because you don't have sex with them. I mean, we already know this. Having sex with a person doesn't suddenly make them the most important person in your life.
Yeah.
Why would it go the opposite way?
There are these weird, arbitrary societal expectations around adult consensual sexuality that they're arbitrary. They come from nowhere. Or even if they do come from somewhere, it's like, yeah, but why?
Oh, that's a whole nother video.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, we could get. I would love to get into it. I actually,
Mm,
like, a lot of my research is on this very topic. But it's really ironic because polyamory is not all about sex. People, of
yeah,
course, who are polyamorous have sex. It's debatable whether we have more sex or not. It depends on the situation. Some people who are monogamous have a lot of sex. Some people don't. There's all these other types of relationships which monogamous people don't have, that are not based on sex.
yeah.
And they only exist in polyamory, like with a metamor.
Mm,
And if you have multiple partners and your partner has multiple partners, you're also going to have more metamors and more people who are not in your immediate group, your
mm,
immediate sexual relational group, than not, right?
mm,
So by definition, actually, you're going to have more non-sexual relationships, and that both doesn't make it less than, nor does having sex make it more than. If you follow, the most idealized form of monogamy, then you should be with the person that you first had sex with, and that's it. The things that people like talk about their grandparents about,
yeah,
and it's supposed to be a virtue, right?
yeah.
Grandma and grandpa stayed together even though they hated each other or whatever. Like,
It's like, oh, great,
I mean, like, what is
fantastic.
that saying? You know?
Exactly, exactly. And it's those social expectations again. Like, people think that they have a right to dictate how you should partner with people or how you should parent and things like that. There are people who at the same time don't want me to have other partners, but
Mhm.
do want me to have a bunch more children.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Oh yeah.
why?
Oh, it's all bound up with patriarchy. There's these roles you're supposed to play. You're supposed to reproduce and be controlled in a very particular way, right? I mean,
Yeah,
unethical non-monogamy has been around forever. Men have been doing that for centuries. As long as they don't get too out of hand and like it's, kind of plausible deniability, then don't ask any questions.
mm,
And in a case of a very patriarchal relationship, she might be putting herself in danger by
yeah.
questioning that.
Especially if he's got some level of power or notoriety. It's like, oh, well, you should just expect that, he's going to want to have sex with other people and other people are going to want to have sex with him. And that's sort of what you sign up for. But when you flip the script, yeah,
No.
women are scrutinized in a much different way when it comes to those sorts of things. It's like you can choose to be with just one person. It's when it's not a choice
Yeah. And for
that's
almost everybody in
really
the world, it's not a choice.
mm,
If you think about, we live in cities, we're middle class, we're fairly privileged by, very privileged by world standards, reasonably privileged by national standards in Australia and the US. My circumstances aren't like ideal, but at the same time, I have the latitude to do things. I
yeah,
don't have to follow social convention. And also, my life is not in danger by me doing this. But actually, the majority of people in the world, that's not the case. It's just like, it's just fundamentally not the case. You would actually be putting some people are putting their life in danger by doing these sorts of things. It's really those people I'm most concerned about. I'm not so concerned about myself, even though
Yeah.
obviously I want to pursue my own desires.
And that's one of the things that grates on me about like the personal development industry and people talking about how you can just choose to be a certain way and everything's going to be fine and live, laugh, love, and we can manifest our way out of these things that are really perpetuated by this adherence to social constructs that don't really make sense and can be quite oppressive.
Oh yeah.
It's not even necessarily like for you and for me, it's not about like, oh, I talk about this because I want people to accept me. It's like, no. Like, think about the greater social ramifications about this adherence to these constructs. It's about other people as well. It's about what people have access to. It's about what powers political change. You're very much an activist. I'm an activist as well. And that's one of the things that drew me to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. We have to, obviously, we strive for a different world, another horizon,
Yeah.
a world in which people are totally unbound. They can have any type of relation they want, like any desire, like, and I don't mean that in like the marketing sense of it. Like, I mean desire as in like the ability to live in the most rich way possible.
Yeah.
That's the world I strive for. I know you strive for it, but we also are
Yeah.
building, we want to build that, we have to build that world from where we are. It definitely helps if you begin to orient yourself around like these kind of networks of relationships, rather than like, I'm an individual and you are meeting my needs. And
Mm.
you are meeting my needs. When it's reciprocal, then you can build kind of this capacity, not just for everybody involved to live better and live more closely and be more enriched as you are a community. That community then has this capacity to connect to other people. Then with that capacity, you could begin to change the social horizon. If we're expanding our hearts amongst each other, if we expand it further out into the greater society through collective action, political organizing, and other things, we can then like push the bounds of what's possible. And really, what is possible is so much greater than what has ever existed, right? There's so many things we don't know we don't have yet.
Yeah. Exactly. And that is such a good way to kind of summarize the whole thing. It's like we don't know what we don't have yet. And if we're being told over and over again that what we should be striving for is to adopt the trappings of success that are designed around that single monogamous family structure, that again is someone else telling us what should be making us happy.
When we're talking about these things, we want to push the boundaries, not just for the people we're talking to think about things a little differently, but also for ourselves. How are we trying to every day like push the boundaries of like social belonging and existence, and like of like when you consider the possibilities, when you open up, when you begin to like not see the world through these very predetermined structures, which have a very particular and oppressive purpose, so that you are channeled into a very particular way of being that benefits a certain group of people. It's a whole
For
separate
this
video.
one little life that we all get to live. It's like, it's just one life. Like, who gets to dictate those sorts of aspects of it? And like my final word on the whole thing would really be that it's okay to not understand ethical non-monogamy or polyamory. It's okay to ask questions. I'm very open to discussing and answering questions. It's worth realizing that yes, people do live this way and they're very staunch about it, and there are a lot of reasons behind it that are worth exploring.
You think about it as a way of opening yourself up to more relations, more community, more richness, and not just in like you individually going out in order to like meet your own needs. That will really limit you. If anybody's considering non-monogamy that's not already identified that way, that's an extremely limiting way to think of it. actually, when you open yourself up to these like more rich, like, relationships, not just with people you're dating, but with a whole network of people, not only will you obviously, I think, have more needs met than you could have imagined, but also you really begin to build another way of being. You're able to think and be in different ways
Yeah.
that are not necessarily like better. Maybe people feel threatened by that.
Mm.
It's just that
It's
like
liberating.
it it's it makes things possible.
Yes. Beautifully put. Thank you so much for joining me on this video, and I think there are definitely other things that we can make videos about relating to this topic, some things we can delve a bit more deeply into, and I look forward to that.
Absolutely.
As long as you're wearing another awesome shirt.
Yeah. I love this shirt. Yeah.
We'll make a video about the shirt. Yeah, it's always good talking to you, and definitely talk again soon. Hopefully,
Absolutely.
international borders will open up at some point within the next year or two, and we can actually like spend time together for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be nice. You take care of yourself and your partner and your beautiful little child.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it was great being here.
Good. I love you.
Love you too. See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you for watching, and if you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and share it with someone else who can benefit from it. Subscribe to my channel and hit the notifications bell so you know exactly when I've uploaded a new video. You can also book a free life coaching session with me through my website, leslievcoaching.com, and we can work together online or right here in my studio. Follow me on my socials to keep up with what I'm doing, and please get in touch with any questions, comments, or video ideas you may have. I'm Leslie V, and I'll see you in the next video.